Somebody else had died in his house. They dragged the body out and they stripped the body naked and poured bleach all over the body.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
To give context to the situation, there was like a county lines issue with these drugs.
Yeah.
Your brother was holding drugs for one lot of people. Was it North?
North, yeah.
North London.
Mm.
And then these drug pushers were holding drugs for South London.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a conflict or whatever.
Yeah.
You feel they purposefully killed your brother.
Yeah.
You feel that this was no accident.
Yeah.
That this was designed
Yeah.
to kill him.
Yeah. Abuse that happened when we were younger. I didn't find that out until I was in my late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened to me and my brother.
Mm.
Now, it's hard to describe what happened because at the time it was all dreams and visions that I was sort of getting. So things that were going through my head, I couldn't believe that had happened.
Later on in your 20s, you realise actually they weren't dreams, they were events that had been then verified by your brother as well.
Yeah.
You've lost your brother, but also you've only just opened up about this sexual abuse, and he's the only one that can really give you any clarity.
Clarification,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been taken away.
Yeah.
What on earth was going through your head at the time?
I planned to kill them both. That was the night that I was going to do it.
Hi, this is Ella McChrystal and this is The New Mind. Today's guest is Richard. Now, Richard reached out to me on Instagram because he's got one hell of a story to share. This story is multifaceted, but it's very, very graphic at times. I'm just going to warn you of that from the beginning. Lots and lots of trauma. And one of the reasons that I'm sharing this story is because it's something I say often. We walk past people in the street, we work with people every day, we know our neighbours, but sometimes we don't know the depth of their stories. And I guess I want to share this because you never know what's going on behind closed doors. You never know what's going on in people's lives. And I just want to remind you all to be kind to each other, to connect with each other and to care about each other. So before we start, that was really important to say. But moving on to you. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you for having me.
I know you're nervous today.
Yeah.
This is not something you do regularly, is it?
No.
And you reached out to me because I think one of the things you said is you followed me for a while and you kind of felt safe to do this. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. 100%.
What made you decide that you wanted to do it though? Because obviously you felt safe and there's a lot for you to say, but what made you want to actually speak about some of the things you've been through?
I think really it's the mental health side of things where everybody says it's good to talk,
Yeah.
get it out in the open. You have to be careful with who you talk to
Yes.
because, so what you're sharing is then privy to everybody else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think maybe my story could help someone. I wouldn't want them to go through what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I always do a chat with everyone before we start recording just to get an idea of what we're talking about today. And I said it was multifaceted. What I mean by that is it's multi-trauma. There's a lot of trauma that you've been through in your life, a lot. And we've got a lot to cover. So we want to make sure we hit all of the points. So I'm not going to waffle too much in the between because I am a waffler. But we're going to start at the beginning. So tell me about your early years, sort of the first few years that you can remember.
Right. So I had two brothers.
Mm-hmm.
One's a lot younger, 7 years younger, one 3 years older.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, we lived in a council estate. My dad was a builder, carpenter. My mum was a housewife, house mum. Very loving family. My brother grew up, he was disabled. He had cysts in between his lung and windpipe when he was born. And he had to be rushed to Great Ormond Street Hospital. On the way, he died. I think he had a lack of oxygen to the brain.
Yeah.
So with that, obviously they'd done operations, but he then had suffered with narcolepsy.
So he died, but they revived him?
Yeah, I think it's happened twice. He also had his legs were inwards, pointing inwards. So he had to have his legs broken, tendons cut and replaced and restarted. But growing up, he would get a lot of stick. People call him a spastic, all those nasty names that people used to call him. And he did a really good job of protecting me when we were younger.
This is the one that's 3 years older, is it? Yeah.
Because I would, people calling names, I would defend my brother, and so that side of it. As I got older, the roles took over, and I was sort of protecting him a bit more.
Yeah. So actually, although he was the older brother and he was looking after you for the first few years, you sort of saw all the bullying going on and you realised you needed to be his protector. So you stepped up.
Yeah, our parents put us in separate schools as well, because she knew that as we grew up, things would happen and I'd probably get into more trouble at school by protecting him. So that was even harder, not being in the same school as him.
Yeah, I bet.
So so that was hard.
And then you had a young brother as well.
Yeah, younger
So
brother.
he comes along a lot later.
Yeah.
So those first few years are challenging because already you've got like a job to do, which is protect your brother. And then I guess the control's taken away when you got split up at school.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of the things that were going on in childhood then that you experienced, but perhaps we have to look at that retrospectively.
So abuse that happened when we were young. When we were younger, I didn't find that out until I was in my late 20s. And it was one of my dad's friends, and it happened to me and my brother. Now it's hard to describe what happened, because at the time it was all dreams and visions that I was sort of getting. So things that were going through my head, I couldn't believe that had happened.
To give context to that, you thought you were having dreams.
Yeah.
You thought you were having visions of this really disturbing stuff. Later on in your 20s, you realised actually they weren't dreams. They were events that had been then verified by your brother as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is graphic abuse that you were both exposed to from your dad's friend. And as a child, when you have, or a young person having dreams about this stuff, you must think that you're going mad, because you think it's a dream, you think it's a vision, you don't have a clue at the time that this is actually real, because there's a disconnect in the memory. So the memory's stored it right at the back by the sounds of it, and this subconscious reaction to it is that you're having dreams, but it's not being fully retrieved in the brain. So you must have been feeling quite uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, very, yeah. And every time it would come up in my mind, it would just then start making me angry, because I was like, why am I thinking this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why am I only thinking about it now?
Yeah.
How did I not remember back then? Because I can remember quite a lot.
Yeah.
As a kid from young, but not that scenario.
Do you understand now that your brain was trying to protect you?
Yes. Yeah.
But at the time, you don't know that.
No.
So your brain's job is to keep you alive, and it will cut things out, prune things away that it sees as not useful to you or not needed. And then it retains the stuff that it sees as useful and needed. So, and I say that because there might be people that are experiencing a similar thing that are listening and going, yeah, I feel the same. And I don't really remember anything, but I feel like something's happened. I mean, to give context, the dreams, if you can share those dreams, and we now know that happened, but this, like I said, it's quite graphic. So this, in the dreams, things are being done to you and to your brother, and you're seeing it and feeling it as well. So
at the time when I told my parents, they couldn't quite grasp the concept of it, because it was, we've never left you with them alone long enough.
Yeah.
But there was plenty of times.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was only until I questioned my brother about it that he came out and told me about the whole scenario.
So how did that conversation come about? I mean, we've got to go backwards because there's other traumas that have happened as well, but we'll go forwards to the time where you say to your brother, because you said to me out there, I was a nasty, horrible person for a while. And I said to you, you weren't nasty and horrible. You were, it might have been perceived like that by other people, but actually what was going on is you're in survival mode. Your brain is just, fighting all the time because this thing has happened to you. It's horrendous and horrible. Your brain's disconnected from it and you're having dreams instead. But your body and your brain are connected to the fact that there's predators and you have to fight everybody and anything that could be in your way. So I'm saying that again because I think to say nasty and horrible is unfair. I think it's survival mode. You were angry because you were fighting something the whole time. So eventually you share this with your brother.
Yeah, I see my brother in the town. We sat on the bench for a good half an hour talking. And he because at the time I tried a suicide attempt, and he was like, "Bro, what are you doing? You know, give me a cuddle." And he gave me a cuddle, and he's like, "What are we going to do with you?" He goes, "What's going on in your head?" And then when I actually came out with it all, that's when he mentioned it all, and I was like, "Why have you gone for so long without saying anything to me?" And he said, "Well, why am I going to bring it up if you don't mention anything to me? I just assume that you don't remember it." He goes, and I said, "So what, you've remembered that all your life and you've not said anything?" He said, "Well, why do you think I started drinking? Why do you think I've done the drugs?" I said, "So it's bothered you?" And he said, "Yeah, of course it has."
He just shut it off with drinking drugs.
Yeah.
How sad. But he'd remembered it all.
Yeah.
And do you know how many times I've heard this in clinic with clients where they feel like especially because they're children at the time that it happens, they feel like, well, I don't want to put that into their head if they don't remember it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the responsibility of that as well, like, it's just so hard, isn't it? It's awful. So he escaped through drinking drugs, but all the time your brain is giving you pieces of information anyway. It's just that he verified it there and then.
Yeah.
However, something awful happened that day.
Yeah. So I had to go to the job centre. So I left him. And in between that time, my son was in the town on his bike, and he see us. So he came over and he asked my brother if he had any money. And my brother said, "Yeah, I've got a £5, take the £5. And my boy said, no, if that's your only money, I don't want to take it." So my boy blamed himself for my brother overdosing or whatever it was, and for not taking that money. And I said to him, "That's not, he would have done it whatever way."
Yeah.
You know. So anyway, I then met up with my brother that afternoon, literally only for a few minutes, because he was with people that I didn't really like. And I said to him, "Look, I'll come and speak to you tomorrow. We can have a good proper chat about it." And he said, yeah, no worries, bruv, no worries.
So to be clear, you've just disclosed and understood each other.
Yeah.
This has happened.
Yeah.
You go off to the job centre, you see him very briefly, and you say, "We'll continue this tomorrow."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was like, "Right, okay." So then I got home, and the night was going, and then I went into a panic attack about 8 o'clock, and my chest was hurting. I laid down, and then literally I went off to sleep, and then I woke up to my doorbell going. So I've let the people in, and I've gone to the door to have a look, see who's coming out the lift, and it was my mum and dad. And as my mum come through out of the lift and then into my flat, I looked at her and I said, "It's Daniel, isn't it?" And she looked at me and said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" I said, "He's dead, isn't he?" And they both looked at me, and my dad was like, "How'd you know? Who have you spoken to?" I said, "No, I just know." So they were worried that I would go off the rails straight away, so they stayed around for about half an hour before they left. They told me where he had died and whatnot, and what was surrounding it. And it was two guys that, known drug pushers, were involved with his death. We've given him heroin. And the heroin mixed with his medication, because he had narcolepsy and the other problems he had.
Yeah.
And that's what killed him. But the fact that he was dead for 25 minutes before they called an ambulance was quite a shocker.
So he, again, there's more details to this story. He had used drugs and had used alcohol, as he'd said in the conversation, to escape some of this pain that had been in. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that, to give context to the situation, there was like a county lines issue with these drugs.
Yeah.
So you said to me your brother was holding drugs for one lot of people. Was it North?
North, yeah.
North London. And then these drug pushers that you're speaking about were holding drugs for South London.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a conflict or whatever.
Yeah.
And there'd been some argy-bargy, is probably the best way to put it. Was it the day before? Or
a couple of weeks.
Couple of weeks before.
Yeah.
And so they felt like your brother was a threat. So your brother's with these people and they give him some heroin, but they give him too much heroin.
Yeah.
He dies as a result, but they don't do anything for 25 minutes.
Apart from clean the house
Apart from
any paraphernalia. The police only found 2 pieces of tin foil in the whole of the house, and that was outside the back door. Tiny piece.
Yeah.
And then a weed grinder that was on a top shelf that obviously they didn't know about, but the rest of the house was pristine.
And your belief is
They cleaned the house up.
they cleaned the house up too.
Because the guys who flat it was, he'd been in prison before for using his house as a drug house before.
Right.
So someone's died in his house before, and he got arrested and got done for it and went to prison.
Yeah.
Somebody else had died in his house. They dragged the body out, and they stripped the body naked and poured bleach all over the body.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, this is hardcore stuff. This is not just like a little fight in the pub which has gone wrong. This is serious crime.
One of the guys was known through the years of being a nasty, horrible piece of work.
Yeah.
So
basically, you feel they purposely killed your brother.
Yeah.
You feel that this was no accident.
Yeah.
That this was designed to kill him.
Yeah.
Which, on so many levels, is horrific. You've lost your brother, but also you've only just opened up about this sex abuse, and he's the only one that can really give you any, not information, but to give you any clarity.
Clarification,
yeah. And that's been taken away.
Yeah.
What on earth was going through your head at the time?
I planned to kill them both. And I meticulously planned it. To the point where I'd had an argument with a mate. We'd been out drinking, and that was the night that I was going to do it, but we didn't. Well, I'd done some drugs, and I had an argument with my mate, and he was being quiet. He was giving me attitude back, and I thought, why are you being like this? Anyway, ended up having an argument. I went to my flat, I got a gun, and I kicked his door in.
Wow.
And I pointed the gun at his head. I said, are you going to say it now? And he was like, no, I'm really sorry. But I'd scared him so badly that was our friendship gone. And I regretted it. The thing is, I left his flat and somebody seen me with a gun and they called the police. When the police turned up, I'd already got rid of the gun, but I had a knife. And then the police got me down and arrested me for having a knife. And then I was put on a tag.
Right.
So I couldn't leave my house. I couldn't get involved with anybody else. So it was all right in a way. But yeah, like I said, I meticulously planned how I was going to get rid of them. But then I had 2 Mormon come to my flat, and I think they came at the right time, really. And I'd never believed in God. I was quite an atheist, to be fair. And they said, have you ever prayed? And I said, no. So they went through the process of praying and how to pray and how to pray properly and be grateful and thankful for what you have. So I went through that process, and I did that for free every day, 3 times a day. And then within 9 months, the 2 guys that had killed my brother are both dead. So one spent 2 months in hospital with major organ failure. They couldn't replace all of his organs, so the family had to switch his machine off. And the other guy, the main guy, he had an argument with the guy that he was living with. And the guy he was living with slit his throat. When he slit his throat, he wrapped him up in parcel tape, put him in a yellow vault box, and then buried him in his back garden and put a patio over the top of him.
I mean, this is the second time I've heard this, and I'm still not less shocked than I was the first. Like, I mean, you want to kill them. 2 Mormons happen to knock on the door, which you don't really get Mormons knocking on the door anymore. And they're like, just pray. Just pray. You pray 3 times a day for a significant amount of time, and then these 2 people end up dead. One, organ failure. The other one is killed.
Yeah.
But he's buried under the patio. The bit that is quite interesting, though, is that the person that buried him didn't take his mobile phone out of his pocket.
Yeah.
So he was buried with the signal of where he was. Yeah. So what happened next?
So the police pulled me in. They wanted to question me because the last time I saw him, because I'd got hold of them both in that period of time and bashed them both up.
So you had a go at them. You'd had a little rough and tough.
Yeah. So they knew that I was on the rampage, and I was literally through the town. I wasn't working, so literally I'd get up in the morning. The guy who I had threatened, he was dropping me drugs in the morning before he went to work. I know I'd then probably sit in the pub all day, and I'd be waiting for them all to come out to go and get their drugs. So I would then go into the town, and I'd just be walking up and down the town waiting for anybody that I knew was a drug dealer or a junkie. and then I'd make sure that they weren't in the town. Anyway, when the police pulled me in, they said, look, we know what you've been doing. We want to know when was the last time you see him. And they said, like, you're the own vigilante, because basically where all the drug dealers and all the druggies were, they went from one area to then one central area, so the police could keep an eye on them all. So they said, you're doing us a favour, really.
Yes.
So from that, I then told the police that the last time I see him, that he came at me with an axe, because obviously I beat him up. And I thought, well, if he's coming at me with an axe, I'm not going to carry a knife or anything. I'll just wait for the time to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, then, like I say, then 9 months later, they were done.
And so the police were obviously able to locate the body because of this mobile phone, because it was in his pocket.
Yeah. But they had the guy for a certain amount of hours, and he wasn't admitting to it. Then they kept him for longer, and then eventually he admitted to doing what he'd done.
Right. Yeah. So eventually he owned up. But didn't he try and like plaster over the walls or something as well?
Yeah, the whole house was replastered. And how the police done it, they came in to raid him for drugs.
Yeah.
And they got the blue lights out straight away. And
they could see.
The blood, yeah.
So he was never, I mean, he couldn't hide it anyway,
no.
But he eventually admitted to it.
Yeah.
So, but these guys were the ones involved. They were quite renowned for being horrible people. Yeah. Now, to be clear, are they the people that killed your brother that were horrible people, or is it? Yeah. There was a couple of things you said to me before we started recording about some of the things they'd done before they killed your brother, which are awful. I mean, one of the things was you mentioned them dangling a lady by her legs over a high-rise
balcony. Yeah,
balcony.
Block of flats. Yeah.
I mean, they were not. I mean, these are full-on gangster types, aren't they?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then even your mother-in-law, you said, was affected.
Well, we had. She was the landlady of the local pub, and the same group of people. They were a lot younger then, and they're a lot more up the ranking of where they were within. Yeah. The underworld.
Underworld, yeah.
And they'd come in, terrorise all the locals, throw pool balls about, throw pool tables about, chairs, break all the optics. And the one of the guys, he grabbed hold of a guy who I was literally 3 foot away from. And he ushered the mate, he gestured him over with his head. And he picked up the glass ashtray. That was when pubs used to have the big old glass ashtrays. Yeah. And he pashed it straight across his face.
Oh my God.
And it cut his face and cut his eye. Yeah, and like I say, I had splatters of blood all over me. But then from that point, he was like, right, they're getting done.
Yeah.
And then it was literally a few days later that he caught up with him and stabbed him. And he was minutes away from death, I think. And then the police got him in the police car and drove him to the hospital. So, yeah.
So, I mean, it wasn't a pretty picture, to put it politely.
No.
A lot of violence that you've been aware of or seen or been involved with.
Yeah.
And I mean, understandably so after what happened with your brother, but also you'd suppressed years and years and years worth of sex and trauma and all these other things. So do you feel like that point in your life, you're just, this violence, this pain, this anger is all linked to all of that stuff?
Yeah. But I didn't know. I didn't know at what level it was, because when I tried to get help, it was making out that this was wrong and that was wrong.
You were the problem, basically.
Yeah.
You're mad.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
I mean, we're putting that in a short because there's millions of different things they were trying to label you with. Yeah. But what wasn't necessarily being looked at is, and I said this to you off camera, I'm going to say it again. When children go through lots and lots of trauma, so much of them has to shut down and suppress because they're told to, which we'll come to in a minute with some of the things when you were scared to go to sleep at night. But they have to shut everything down. That they don't have, one, because of prefrontal cortex development, the capacity to explain, to analyse, to logicalise, and to be able to verbalise things in a way that makes sense. So the emotion is too big. The thing that's happening to them is too scary. Their brain literally can't process it. So it shrinks it down, sticks it into a neat little box, compartmentalises it, pushes it somewhere, which is why I think in your case you didn't remember. Your brain decided you shouldn't. But the fight-flight response that you have when you're being sexually abused or when you're witnessing sexual abuse, it's an energetic, cellular, neurotransmitter, hormone response. All of that gets shoved down and put in your body, and it starts to affect different areas of your body in terms of where you hold it. So self-esteem, anger, fight, flight, love, all those different things that should be a nice, easy flow for children. It all gets affected. And so we then have this lack of processing, but also what children do, which is quite similar to animals, is their senses increase because they don't have the prefrontal analysis and logic, and because they're holding so much down, they might become sensory in other ways. So they might be able to feel more in terms of, they might be very emotionally reactive, or they might even be able to sense more from other people because they're in a hypervigilant state. And certainly it's fair to say that some children and even adults are absorbing the energies of others. They're not necessarily consciously aware that they've heard something or seen something, but they're absorbing it anyway.
Yeah.
And so like dogs or other animals, their senses are heightened, but they're not processing. So the behaviours can become what looks like mad to other people, but actually makes perfect sense when you put it into context. So you weren't being treated well by the mental health system, is fair to say.
Yeah.
And in fact, is it fair to say that you were put on medications that were making you worse?
Yeah, yeah.
And you ended up being quite poorly, didn't you?
Yeah. I became addicted to painkillers, anti-inflammatories, at the same time as well as self-medicating as well.
Yeah, of course.
The some of the other medications, it was like I was a guinea pig.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this
Because
is what happens.
Yeah, they didn't
know.
Yeah. And I wasn't prepared at that time to divulge, but not even a small amount of what was going on.
Yeah.
Only because I didn't trust anybody around me.
Well, God, you wouldn't do. Well, how could you trust anyone?
Yeah.
You're growing up around, well, I say growing up, you're a young man around all this violence, and then you're severely sexually abused as a child. You're not going to trust anyone.
No.
Simple as that. And so when people label you as mad and throw tablets at you like they're going out of fashion, you're already self-medicating. Like you said, give me it all.
Yeah.
I'll take it, but then you end up worse. So I want to just go back to a point, because we've gone to the adult stuff and we'll come back there. But we mentioned the bit there about how children don't speak and don't talk. One of the things that happened to you is that you were scared to go to sleep at night because you thought you were going to die.
Yeah.
So how old were you at that time?
I think it must have been about 5 or 6.
So this shows how young you must have been when the abuse started. Tell me why that's significant, that, your mum would come up and you'd be scared to go to sleep. So
basically, obviously it's bedtime. Mum would say, right, up, brush your teeth, get into bed, and I'll be up in a minute, give you a kiss. Kiss goodnight. So we'd get into bed and I'd hear my mum's footsteps coming up, and I would know that I didn't want to fall asleep. And then she'd cuddle me and say, "Go on, you've got to go to sleep now." And then I'd be crying. I'd be like, "Ma, I don't want to go to sleep." She goes, "Why don't you want to go to sleep?" I said, "I don't want to die. I want to wake up." She's like, "Of course you're going to wake up. You're not going to die in your sleep." And I could not. That was the only thing I could remember as a youngster, apart from playing Star Wars. That's really what I could remember. But then when I saw my brother on the day that he told me, he said to me, "Do you not remember not liking to go to sleep because you thought that you'd die?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, that's because he said that if you fall asleep, if you tell anybody in your sleep, you'll die." Yeah. So one of the ways he scared you into not ever revealing what he was doing was by saying, if you say anyone, say this to anyone, you're going to die in your sleep. Yeah. So you were petrified to go to sleep. And I never knew why that was up until the day that my brother said that to me. It just, this is the thing, the conditioning of the mind, the grooming, it's just awful. Because I even asked my mum and dad, I said, "Why did I get circumcised?" I said, why was that? Yeah. "Oh, because it was tight and blah, 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 and it would split." And I thought, "No, that can't be right." Yeah. And then so
So now looking back, some of the things that were done to you,
Yeah.
you think that he'd ruined your,
Yeah.
well, he'd damaged the foreskin.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really brave of you to talk about, because I know that when the first person you reveal it to then dies on that same day, you know, you're left with that, like we said, without that clarification, without that person going, it's okay, like, I'm here for you. You've had to do so much of this navigation of who you are and everything on your own. And like I said, actually, in the meantime, there's so many other things that happened. A couple of the things that I'll say, and we'll go into it in more detail, is one, your love for the military. You came from a military family. Something then happened that prevented you from being able to fulfill that dream. And then very sadly, a year after that, something awful happens again. So tell me about your love of military first.
I suppose it stems from my grandparents, my aunties and uncles, friends and family. Pretty much my circle would be ex-military, military. And I know the military is quite big and there's a lot of people, but there's a lot of people that don't like the military, and you know, but they were my people. So yeah, I tried to join the military at a young age. I'd already become a chef. I'd already got my qualifications, and I'd been a chef in the military. That didn't happen because I had a motorbike accident when I was 16, and it caused me to have spinal contusion, nerve damage, and that prevented me, and also problems with my knees.
So medically, you couldn't enter the military.
Not really. Maybe years down the line I might have been able to, but I did try, and it didn't come to fruition. So it was a part of my life where, growing up as a kid, that's what I wanted to be.
It was your dream.
My dream, yeah. So, you know, I used to, even when the Falklands War was on, and I see all the troops going in on the boats, so I said to my granddad, I said, "Who are they?" And he went, "They're the Marines." And so you want to be.
So they were like your heroes.
Yeah. The celebrities, they're not my heroes. People that have done the nitty gritty are my heroes. So yeah, so that was a big blow for me. And then my best mate died at 140 mile an hour head-on crash on a day that I was supposed to have been in the car with him.
Wow.
So I was supposed to have been a passenger, but my other friend was in the car with him. He survived. But yeah, he was so damaged that his family turned off the machine.
So tell me about him, because he was pretty special to you, wasn't he? Yeah,
I mean, when we moved from one town to another, we moved from a council town, council estate, to a village that had more millionaires in 1 square mile than anywhere in the country. So it was quite rich. So when we moved from there to there, I didn't know anybody, you know, and I was a council kid. Everybody else.
You were the odd one out.
Yeah, very much with the odd one out. Obviously, I didn't have any brothers at the school. They were at different schools. And this one lad, he gravitated towards me. He looked a bit geeky. He had glasses, you know. And I noticed that in the playground, the other boys were picking on him. So I wouldn't have that. So I went over and told all the boys that were
Even though you were a new one?
Yeah.
You went into protector mode again?
Yeah. So then he said, "Oh, thank you." And then we went in, and basically in school we had to stand up and read the book and whatnot. And at lunchtime, the kids would have to ring the bell for dinner time. So it was my turn to ring the bell for dinner time. And I'm looking at the clock. I can't read the time. I don't know what time it is.
How old are you?
It was third year junior.
Oh, so about 7 or 8?
Yeah. So about 8 years old. And so I'm looking at the clock, looking at the seconds tick by, not knowing what the time is at all. And in the end, I just thought, all right, I'm going to go for it. And I rung the bell. Everybody's come in to line up for dinner. And did I get a telling off? Because I was half an hour early.
Oh, bless.
So I got a real telling off because they thought I'd done it on purpose, when actually I didn't know how to tell the time.
Oh.
So from that, he then taught me how to tell the time. He taught me how to read properly, taught me how to write, you know, learn all those things that I didn't learn, because I think
so cute.
I think I had a little bit of ADHD at the time as well.
Yeah.
He taught me how to play chess. So he took me under his wing, and nobody bothered him again. We grew up. when we got to leave junior school, he went off to a different senior school than I did, but we carried on staying in touch. We used to play ice hockey and go ice skating. We were best mates. So the day that he died was a massive shock for me. Yeah.
Very difficult, because like you say, it was like he was more of a soulmate by the sounds of it. It wasn't just your best mate, he was your soulmate. You looked after each other. You were his protector, but he was your teacher.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's really cute. And like I said to you, when you told me that story the first time, it feels like an American movie, you know, when you see the two boys, their relationship builds and just how special it is. But he was 17, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And like a year before, you'd had your motorbike accident and obviously injured, and that sort of your dreams of going into the military at that point are dying, and then your best friend at such a young age is dying. Bear in mind, for the listeners, at this point you haven't told anybody or had this conversation with your brother, because we've gone forwards and backwards.
Yeah.
So you're carrying all that trauma from that anyway, with not realising what's gone on there. Plus these things have happened in your life. You're 17. All of this has already happened. I mean, you know, this is why I said at the beginning about we walk past people in the street, we work with people, we live next door. Don't assume anything about anyone. You just don't know what they've been through. No. And, you know, if you look at, I say this a lot, you know, my daughter's 17 this year, and I think, God, I don't know how do you navigate all of those different things with someone so young? Obviously, as a psychotherapist, I would know what to do with someone coming to see me for therapy, and I would work very closely with them. But, you know, back then, that wasn't a thing. No. You were just like, dust yourself up. Pick yourself up and get on with it. You know, you didn't talk to people. You didn't
man up.
It was very much that culture. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with masculinity. No. Like, I don't want to, like, for any stretch of the imagination, make people think that there's anything wrong with masculinity, but there wasn't the support to remain masculine whilst also being able to talk about your feelings or explore why you were so angry or explore that grief. You can do both. You can be very masculine and you can explore your feelings, and you can do all of those things.
The thing is, though, with exploring your feelings, you tend to shy away from it, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
Because that's exactly what I was doing. But every time I became emotional, it then made me angry.
Well, this is the problem. And that's where the masculinity turns into fight. So you could be very masculine, but not feel like you want to fight all the time. And obviously, I think men are more wired to fight because they're the hunters and they've got to fight all sorts to get the food. So there is a natural fight in there, and that's where I think it gets dangerous for young boys that have got trauma and grief and loss and anger, because they're naturally wired more to have that in them. And then if there are so many suppressed feelings, not just in terms of, we talk about feelings as though they're thoughts. The feelings I'm talking about are the cellular fight flight feelings as well, like the natural physical response to the thoughts that you're having. You can't, well, some people do, but it's not deemed healthy to go out and fight all the time and stab people and glass people, and you know that's not conducive to you feeling good. So you're learning lots of bad habits of how to deal with those really big traumas. And like I said a little while ago, they're too big. You can't process them at that age. Your brain hasn't finished developing yet. So it's just shoved down into your body, and you're constantly the lion who wants to fight every single animal in the jungle.
That's what it was like.
Yeah.
And even after, when we was living in the pub, and the mother-in-law, she was, you could see, you know, how she was affected by all the trouble that they were causing.
It must have been horrible for her.
Well, I mean, I think we was only in the pub for about a year and a half before we then had to go to a safe house because of mate getting stabbed. But then at the same time, we was towards the end as well, we was at the pub, and outside the kebab shop, you could see the kebab shop from the pub. The pub had shut. I was waiting to lock up, and I could see an altercation happening outside the kebab shop. And the guy had asked the lad for a bit of his kebab. So he gave him a bit of his kebab. And he said, "I'll give us a bit of your Coke." And he said, "No." He goes, "It's my drink." So he put a bottle over his head, or over his face, and then poked the bottle in his face.
Oh, my God.
I think he must have knocked him out as soon as the bottle went over his head, because then he hit the deck. And I ran out of the fire exit of the pub, ran up to the lad, and he was out cold, but there was 2 chunks of glass up in through his cheeks and into his eyeballs.
Oh my God. So this was because he wouldn't give this guy a bit of his coke?
Yeah. And he had a bottle of drink in his hand. So
he was looking for trouble.
Yeah. So I see how bad a state he was. I ran back down to the pub, got the first aid box, come running back up, started giving him first aid. And nobody in the kebab shop called a...
What?
Nobody called an ambulance. They were still serving.
What?
Yeah, and I was like, what?
How old was this lad?
19.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So he's gone in there to buy a kebab and a bottle of coke.
Yeah.
He gets stabbed outside their shop, in his eyes, and they're just carrying on serving people.
Yeah.
While you've run off to get first aid.
First aid kit. Obviously, by that time, the police have turned up. The 2 chunks of glass that were inside through his eyeballs. As he started to come round, I said, "Look, don't open your eyes.
Oh
whatever
my
you do."
God!
The blood was pulsating out of his eye sockets. And then, as I turned him slightly, he had a massive cut from the back of his neck all the way up to his head. And when the police turned up, they didn't get involved. They let me carry on working on him until the paramedics come, because I didn't know at the time that if you're working on somebody, they won't take over unless you say you need to take over.
Right.
So they left me with him. But the police knew exactly who the guy was. They went and nicked him straight away that night. After the court case, the student lost both of his eyes, and he got 6 months in prison.
Oh my God.
So where does that make up any sense?
It makes no sense. And you're, again, another trauma. Violence, trauma. It's just endless at this point. How old are you at that point?
19.
So just so much to take for such a young person. And then obviously we're in chronological order now, aren't we? For when you then start, a few years later, start sharing stuff with your brother, and then your brother dies. Awful things to happen. And there's no doubt about it. I mean, the word awful doesn't even describe that level of loss and grief and all those things that you've gone through.
And I didn't think I'd ever be where I am now.
No, because you said at the very beginning, you really wanted to do this because it's good to talk and to raise awareness, I suppose, of men's mental health, because we're not just talking about, I'm not saying this, look, I'm not minimizing anything when I say this. We're not just talking about being depressed or being anxious. We're talking about shitloads of trauma and what to do with that. And, there are kids now growing up in certain estates, in certain areas, that are going to be seeing very, very similar things.
Exactly that.
And it's just so disturbing to think that now the mental health services are still overstretched. I mean, even for me, I'm private and you can't get in for 4 to 5 months.
Right.
So, and I don't know if my waiting list has always been long anyway, but I think across the board, I've got other talk therapists that work for me here. And although they're not quite as booked up, there's still like a good couple of months wait.
Yeah.
So if you are in a crisis, the mental health crisis team is supposed to help. They are so stretched. The children's mental health services, they are so stretched and broken. So for those kids that are dealing with similar issues to yours, they've been they're in violent homes or in violent communities, there's nothing. I know there's lots of really good community projects and charities that are really trying to help. Yeah. But the problem is big. And it's scary, and the world is changing at a rapid pace. Yeah.
Now, when I found you, that was the best thing I ever did.
Well, you were never a client. I want to just say that. You saw me on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then it made you think.
Basically, when I realised I didn't want to be this person, this character that I was being. And it was affecting me in such a way that I was probably suicidal on a daily basis, because I just didn't. I knew so many people on the other side
that died
that I wanted to see and speak to. It didn't really bother me.
Yeah.
So that, even though I've got 2 lovely boys, I didn't think of them in that way.
Yeah.
I thought they're old enough now.
You didn't think they needed you anymore.
No, I've done my bit as a father, bringing my kids up to 18. They're now adults now.
Do you know how many men out here say that? My kids are fine, they don't need me.
No.
It's a really, really common thing.
And it's only until now I know both of my boys need me.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
I've got a 28-year-old and I've got a 24-year-old.
Yeah.
They're both doing really well.
And they'll always need you.
Yeah. But at the time, I didn't know. And it was another thing as well. It was on Father's Day. I got it was early in the morning. I got a ping on my phone. Happy Father's Day. It wasn't even from one of my kids. It was from one of my boys' friends.
Ah.
But it didn't stop there. I then got another one from another lad. And then I got another one from another girl. Then I got another one. So I had 4 from weren't even my own kids
That were saying Happy Father's Day.
So I know that they hadn't had a that good of an upbringing.
Yeah.
But they looked at me.
Because you looked after them.
Yeah. And that really choked me. And I was like, I've got other people that are relying on me as well.
And do you know how many people, like, I'm so glad you've said that. Because for those that haven't got kids or those, even friends of mine that have had very strong suicidal thoughts, I don't think they realise. When you say that to me, I'm always going to hold that space and I'm always going to hear you. But inside, I'm thinking, please, please, please don't do it because you don't know the value you bring.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. You don't know your own value.
No, you don't.
And we are more important than we led to believe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what would happen to family and friends if you're gone? And I've got it. I've had really close friends that have killed themselves.
And you know that from the other side of it.
Yeah.
But also, before we sort of say the rest of that, because I know it's really important that we mention the people you've worked with, but one of the things that's going and gone to a large degree is community and connection, right? There's lots of political things that we could talk about within that as to why that's gone.
Yeah.
There is a really sad picture in the world right now, and the energy is thick and dark, and people are really, really struggling, be it that they're struggling with recessions, be it that they're struggling post-COVID, be that they're struggling with just the fact that everything in terms of technology has changed so rapidly and everyone's so scared. And, you know, there's subjects we could talk about that would sort of lean into conspiracy theories. I say that in inverted commas. So we won't go too far down that road. But I think it's fair to say that most people are questioning things. And, you know, a really popular thing that we're seeing right now is that all of the fantasy of celebrity is starting to break down because the likes of R. Kelly, recently P. Diddy, to, you know, just gives us an idea of everything that we've been fed has not been true. We've just found out that AstraZeneca has been taken off the shelves because it's now proven of the ill effects of that.
Yeah.
And so whereas a lot of people were very uncomfortable talking about these things, I'm not going to slag off everything. I'm certainly not going to go into that conspiracy theory realm because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but what I will say is that we're starting to understand the complexity of the world more now than ever before. Now, that is relative because I think when we're talking about the need for people who are feeling suicidal, who you definitely have value, you know, especially of a certain age group. I think men and women in their 40s are struggling because everything's changed so drastically. And men and women in their 40s, a lot of them are still feeling disconnected and quite suicidal because they can't cope with the way the world's changed so rapidly.
Yeah.
However, going back to that point, we need people around because we need those people that remember what community looked like. We need those people that remember what connection feels like to try and somehow glue and bridge the gap between the old and the new. Because at the minute it feels like it's broken. So if you're feeling like you haven't got value, trust me, just because the fact that you existed before we are where we are now, like pre-COVID and pre-internet, you are valuable. That the connection is so desperately lacking. If you take yourself out, that's one good person that can still be very valuable. And I think we need to highlight that.
Yeah, massively.
Because where I'm talking about technology there, funnily enough, you were talking about, well, actually it was through Instagram that I saw you, Ella, and you were in a place where you were ready to receive certain information. And it was through seeing some of those videos that you then said, actually, I need to do something about this.
Yeah.
And so you contacted, who was it you contacted?
Kev Bland at the Leg Up Project. And he welcomed me in straight away. I gave him a little insight of what's been going on. And he said, look, he goes, what are you doing next couple of weeks? He said, I'm doing a walk up a mountain. Do you want to come? So I went and met up with him and went on from there. And then,
they were all military guys, weren't they?
All ex-military guys. And, you know, they took me under their wing. And which I really appreciated.
Yeah.
I didn't go into any major detail about stuff
Yeah.
because I still didn't feel that comfortable.
Yeah.
But what it done is it got me out, got me motivated again to actually get out and go for a walk.
Yeah.
And then I realised that there was a lot of other stuff that I wasn't doing, where I'd let my family commitments wane, and I wasn't committed up to them like I should have been.
Mm-hmm.
So then that affects the relationships with me and my wife and my kids. But the Leg Up Project really did help me because they done a little bit like CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. And where I'd done it with the NHS, it went in one ear and out the other. But with the Leg Up Project, I was like, I know that. I know that. And then all these things that were coming in, I was like, I know that. And then all I had to do was just put them all together and start working with it. And that's exactly what I did.
Well, they were providing you the thing that I keep saying about connection and community, that kind of band of brothers.
The tools, yeah.
Yeah, you got your connection community. You were doing breath work, you were doing ice baths, you were doing CBT, but you were doing it with a group of men that understood you and you understood them. Yeah. And that's why I say, emotional pain is a lack of connection. And the feeling of happiness and love is about feeling connected and unified. You started to understand through the connection and the unification with those guys that you had lost that with your family. Yeah. But that's what depression does. That's what trauma does. Basically, when trauma is when a relationship of some kind has created a disconnection from yourself or a disconnection from another. Right. That disconnection so early on. And then obviously you having to disconnect again and again and again from grief, from pain, from violence. You just became so disconnected that actually you felt more connected to the people on the other side, the people that have passed. And you didn't see the value in yourself being here. To recap, those messages, Happy Father's Day, from the people that you had affected in a positive way. Seeing videos on Instagram, myself or others as well. Then being motivated to contact this group, Leg Up Project, connecting again to those guys, doing the work, the walking, the breathing, the ice bath, the talking, the evidence-based thinking, allowed you to reconnect your family.
Yeah. The other thing as well, there was a couple of other groups on Instagram. There was a Jim Self Farmers Club, Rob Vickers. He was good with getting me motivated to start training again, because I told you I wasn't interested in training anymore. Yeah. And the one thing with mental health, and I have to say this to everybody, and I know it's a bit of a cliche because everybody talks about it, exercise and water are the two
important
things. Now you don't, because it's so simple, you don't think.
No, you don't.
It's water and you got to walk. That's how simple it is.
But it's because you when we talked about energy before being trapped in the body, the cellular response, the fight-flight response, you remove emotion through motion. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's the only solution, but if you take a holistic approach, moving your body, hydrating so that you can think with clarity, sleep so you can be clear. Yeah. Look, let me be very clear. I don't get it perfect all the time. I haven't exercised properly for ages because I've not had the time to do it. But there's other things going on in my life which mean that actually there's still a flow state. There's still, and I've always been really good at training, and it is something that I'll get back to in the next few weeks. Yeah. There will always come a time, and I want to say this very specifically, because some people will go, right, okay, I'm drinking the water, I'm not exercising, shit. I'm not sleeping very well, shit, that must mean that I'm not doing it right. What I say is you should be really mindful of the holistic approach and try and do as much of what you can. Yeah. And then if something slips for a while, just be mindful of it and have the goal or the intention to pick it back up again. That's the thing. You can't be perfect all the time. Just do your best.
They say that you can change your habits within 28 days.
Yes.
And I think you can actually change them a bit quicker than that.
Yeah.
Because I've actually managed to change so much.
Yeah.
I don't sniff cocaine anymore.
Yeah.
4 years I haven't done it for.
Well done.
I never thought I'd get past that.
Yeah.
And now I've managed it. I don't even want to go anywhere near any of it. I don't even like to drink anymore.
Yeah.
So my whole perception on where everything's gone.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of healing.
You always will be. You always will be. We always are.
Yeah. And am I ever going to be healed? I don't think I am.
We're always, because there's always life, and life will come and get you. And you've always got to heal from something.
And the thing is, I always use train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. I know it's I know it's a Yoda quote.
No, but I love Yoda.
Yeah,
I mean, let's not minimise Yoda's influence.
I mean, I always had a problem that I'd lose my wife.
Yeah.
And then that's me then worrying about the future.
Yes.
Instead of being present.
Yeah.
I was worrying about the past.
Yeah.
And then I was worrying about the future. And it's like, you know, is she going to leave me? Is she going to die before me? Is it all those...
Yeah. Natural human thoughts, because the brain does that to us. But you're going to have them. But what you got to do is go, right, I've recognised I'm having the thought. Now, maybe just get back in touch with what's going on around me.
Yeah.
You know, and that can be something simple like concentrating on your breath. Or sometimes I'm a bit of a fiddler anyway, but sometimes if I need to ground myself, I'll just start rubbing my arm. No one will know what I'm doing,
right, yeah.
You know, but it's just to, oh yeah, there's my body. I'm here. You know, I don't need to be over there. And actually, sometimes though, negative psychology can actually be positive,
right,
as long as you catch the thought. So, for example, what you've just said there is negative psychology with a positive outcome. So I'm aware that I'm thinking about losing my wife, but actually it's making me really aware that I want to be in the present with her. So sometimes those thoughts are actually very valuable because it reminds you of what you need to focus on. So I always say to people, try not to push those thoughts away. Just look at them and say, where's the value in that thought? The value is, I'm going to really focus on when I'm with her and you know, look at her and study her face when she's smiling and enjoy the cuddles with her because it's important because you can be taken away at any moment. Nothing is ever promised. Nothing. And that's why you should always resolve an argument. You should always, you know, give a lot of love, hug someone for the first time and the last time as though you'll never see them again. And it's the same with food. Like, if you're enjoying your food, really taste that food. You don't know if you're ever going to eat that food again. Like, start to treat everything as though it's the last time. And then you will start to really feel everything. And it can be overwhelming when you get into that space because you might have numbed out, like you did escape with drink, drugs, violence, whatever. For so long, you've numbed. So to really appreciate the present moment can be just like, wow, that's way too much noise all at once. Yeah. Which actually brings me to a really good point, which is you being deaf. You've got hearing aids now. I say that because it reminds me of a story which was beautiful, which I want to share with the listeners. But we're talking about really feeling and being, you know, present. And actually, since you've been deaf, you feel like some of your other senses have actually improved.
Increased, yeah.
Yeah, which is very cool. I know a friend of mine's got hearing problems and he says the same. Like, his other senses are really tuned in. And you see this with people like Stevie Wonder is blind, but he's just a musical magician. Yeah. And, you know, Ray Charles and people like that. So we know that when someone loses something, the other senses tune in even more. And it's fair to say that you are quite a tuned in kind of guy. And this was sort of validated by someone after an experience with, let's just say, would you say a psychic or would you say a medium?
Yeah, medium, yeah.
So tell me this story.
So I went to see a medium and at the time I was an atheist. I didn't believe in God. I didn't know why I was going to see her. I think maybe I was trying to speak to my brother, you know.
You were trying to get that connection.
Yeah. So anyway, we sat down in front of each other like we are. And she said, right. She said, I've got your brother with me, Daniel. And I looked at her and I thought, how does she even know his name?
Yeah, because that's a lot straight away.
Straight away. And then she went, all right, he's here with your sister, Michelle. All right, well, you fucked that up because I haven't got a sister.
No.
Yeah, so I sat there and I was thinking, God, what's she going to come out with? And then she said to me, she goes, oh, your brother's waving at me. I looked at her and I thought, what's he waving? She went, no, hang on. No, he's not waving at me. He's telling me he's got his finger back. And she's gone like that with the exact wedding ring finger. Because
he'd lost a finger early on.
Yeah, when he was 16, he chopped his finger off.
Wow.
And when she said that, I was like, all right, okay.
So now you're listening?
Yeah.
Because she's got the Michelle bit wrong so far. So you're going to listen now because of the finger?
She got my attention now. And she said, no, your sister's been here for quite a while. And some other people came through as well. But with my brother said to her, she said, "Oh, your brother's telling me off now." She goes, "I can't call him Daniel, I have to call him Danny." And I laughed because he don't like being called Daniel. He was always Danny. So she said some other stuff that resonated, and it was hit me as well. Anyway, so I left her and I got in the car, and straight away a song came on that reminded me of my brother.
So
And
you
it was
get
an old song, so it wasn't like it was a regular song that the
that
radio
you play all the
station
time.
pumps out. Yeah, and I was like, wow, because my mum and dad lived on the way home. I popped in to see them on the way home, and I said to my mum, I said, it was interesting. I said, but she said I had a sister called Michelle. And my mum looked at me, and her eyes were wide, and she looked like she had tears in her eyes. And my dad looked at me and went, "You sure?" And basically my mum said that she'd had a baby that was miscarried, and she was at the hospital, and the hospital wouldn't let her see the baby because they thought that she had killed the baby.
Wow.
So she went through life not knowing whether she had a boy or a
But there was a
girl
stillbirth.
Yeah, stillbirth, yeah.
And she never knew.
Yeah, and she never told us. So then when she was explaining, and she said, and if it was a girl, we would have called her Michelle after your dad, Michael.
Oh my God.
So I had to clarify the whole scenario.
Yeah.
Literally a few days ago, because I couldn't remember whether it was real,
Yeah.
whether I'd had that conversation with my mum. And I said, "Do you remember that conversation we had after I see the medium?" She went, yeah. So I was like,
That's unbelievable. But
yeah.
didn't that medium tell you that she felt you had?
Yes.
She said you had the gift, didn't she?
So basically she explained to me how she had her gift and how that was given to her. And she was explaining it all to me, and I was like, I couldn't understand why she was going into detail, because it happened to her when she was 8.
Yeah.
When she had a vision of her mother having her head chopped off by a helicopter.
Oh my God.
And that thing happened. It happened.
Oh gosh.
So so when she said that, I was like, crikey, that's some trauma.
Yeah.
And then she said, you know that you can do what I can do. And I looked at her and thought, yeah, really? What? I'm psychic. And then
But it explains a lot because of the dreams and the visions and everything else that you have. And obviously they were subconscious because they had happened. But there was
sorry to interrupt you. Every time I had the PTSD, my dreams and my flashbacks were not me
remembering.
I was watching it from a distance.
Right.
So it wasn't me having the accident.
Yeah.
I was watching me have the accident.
Yes.
And that
out of body.
Yeah. And it was bizarre, because when I had my motorbike accident, I got flipped over. When the car hit me, I got flipped over the bonnet, facing the sky, arched my back, my head hit the ground, caused the impact, the contusion. I got up, took my crash helmet off, called the guy a rude name, and then collapsed on the floor in the middle of the road. But every time I was having that
flashback,
that flashback, I was watching me on the road. So
you were disconnected from your body and you were watching it from afar.
And then I was watching my nan and granddad turn up in their car.
Oh
because when I gave someone a telephone number, I gave them my nan and granddad's number, not my mum and dad's.
Oh wow!
So my nan and granddad turned up to the scene of the accident. But I
But also, you it's fair to say that so your flashbacks are done from out of body, and obviously the dreams and stuff were being drawn from the subconscious, but essentially you're having strong visuals. But at times in your life when you've been considered to be mentally unwell, you've also heard voices and you've had preemptive visions as well, where those things, much like the lady said to you about, seeing a mum's head get chopped off, and then it actually did happen. There's been moments in your life where that's happened as well. And I'll just say to be very careful. There might have been labels that have been given to you throughout parts of your life where actually you go now, but the things that I saw actually happened. And so all I'm saying is, just to give some context to the story, is that this medium seemed to be fairly spot on with the information. And also there's been times where you've seen something and then it has happened, and it's quite precise, some of the stuff you've seen. So remarkably, you through the forum of Instagram, you were inspired to go and sort of create a new life for yourself, and you've done it really beautifully.
I had to change my whole character. I lost 5 stone in weight. I used to be 19 stone.
Wow. Well done.
Yeah. So a lot of things needed to change. Drinking majority of the time, like I said, I was doing drugs.
Yeah.
So all those things I know I needed to change. I didn't want to be that person, like the character that I had been for so long.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't that person, if you know what I mean.
Well, it had been done to you, a lot of this stuff.
And the thing is that I had so many mates that were all masculine, you know, and if you showed any sort of weakness, you were classed as, you know, weak.
Which is so sad.
It is, but at the same time, men need to be men.
Yeah, this is what I was saying about masculine energy. You know, I really like masculine energy in terms of...
But then, if I remember rightly, halfway through the end of the 90s and the 2000s, that was when masculinity was then classed as toxic.
Yeah. It started to become a different narrative.
And it was like, no, we're just men.
Well, the problem is, and what you've made a very good point there, toxic masculinity is not masculinity. Masculinity is masculinity. There are toxic traits of masculinity, but there's toxic traits of femininity as well. Yeah. And I think the problem is with just labelling something toxic masculinity. Even the word masculinity gets labelled as toxic. There's nothing wrong with masculinity. There's nothing wrong with being in your masculine energy. There's nothing wrong with being in your feminine energy. And what's happened is women have asked for everything and they've got it all, and we've had to step into masculine energy. So we're butting heads with masculine energy now. And so many women I speak to, so many women, including me, are feeling like, oh, I need to step more into my feminine. And I appreciate a man in his masculine. I love that. I love that masculine feminine. And I think it's really important to embody it and to be it. It's just about knowing the nuances of when you've gone too far, you know. And, you know, for example, P. Diddy's energy might be considered toxic, but that doesn't mean all masculine men. And we're wired differently. The brain, I've said it before, so I won't bore everyone with the same thing, but there are fundamental differences within the female brain and the male brain. Same with the body, muscle density, same with the primitive leftovers, that evolutionary neuroscience, you know, men need to be more of the fighter, the hunter. Yeah. All of those things.
Yeah. That has been slowly eradicated from our society.
But then when you go to boxing clubs and you look at those young lads that are a little bit wayward, you put them in a boxing club, they find themselves. So we know that boys need that kind of outlet. The education system really suffocates a lot of boys and girls now.
The thing is as well, lads need the man to teach them to be
they
men.
do.
They need the rough and tumble. They need that's what I did with both of my boys. I mean, I did it with my dad. My dad used to make us cry all the time. I never used to make my boys cry, but... You know,
well, you learn from bits that are a little bit not quite right.
I mean, my dad used to go over the top, but then he made me who I am now, you know?
Well, you know, I think if you look at, again, if you go to animals rather than humans, I'll bring it together neatly in a minute, but you look at the way that, I mean, I've got 2 dogs and they're both boys. And the way they play, it sounds...
Oh, yeah. Tearing each other up.
Yeah. But actually, they're just playing and they're showing their teeth. And the little one, who's only a toy poodle, so he's definitely not a threat, but he's pulling on Sid's mouth. Sid's a Shih Tzu cross Bichon. So I say they're boys, but, you know, they're girl boy dogs, if you see what I mean. But the little one's always pulling on his mouth and on his skin and getting into his jaw. And it looks horrible, but they're playing. And they're 2 boys having a rough and tumble. Yeah. Now, I know that can go too far with humans, and I know that violence isn't what we're talking about here, but I think you're right. Those, you know, martial arts clubs and the boxing clubs, and, you know, I think things like paintballing, I know a lot of girls love it. I can't think of anything worse, but if people, you know, boys love it, don't they? They love the pretend guns and they love all of that.
But then there's so many kids that want to do that. Well, not even kids, men that want to do the stuff, but their mates don't want to do it. Yeah, because it's either it doesn't fit their narrative or whatever. Yeah, and if you're holding back and stopping yourself from doing something because your mates don't want to do it,
Get different mates.
Get different mates
Yeah.
because they're the ones holding you back.
Yeah.
It's like I used to want to do abseiling and all the crazy stuff.
Yeah, I love all
jumping
that.
out of airplanes.
Yeah, I love all of
But
that.
I'd only have a couple of mates that would do it. With me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so in the end, it just got to the point where you've got to go and
Change your circle.
Yeah, got to go and do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Don't wait for gratification from somebody else.
Yeah,
to say
yeah,
it's
you're
okay
right.
to do it.
You're right.
Yeah.
You are right. And I think that's the most powerful message actually out of all of this. Simply because it's that you said something earlier about cliches and exercise, but it's the simple messages that are the truest. The truth is, if you're surrounded by people that don't fit the way you want to live your life, that don't align with your goals and your values, you are going to have to change your friendships. And if you surround yourself with people that allow you to be yourself and allow you to be authentic and free, you will finally start to feel connected again.
Even if you've known them friends all your life.
Yeah, it's true.
They say it about family as well.
Well, I did it with my family, and it's where I've really grown, is where I've cut off the toxic.
Yeah.
And I think this is the same with friends. If you can, I said this with one of my beautiful clients yesterday who's gone through so much, and she said she's found a new group of friends where they are just authentic with each other, and she's never been happier. And I think, and that's after a great deal of loss and all sorts of things, but because she can be herself, she feels connected again.
Yeah.
If you don't feel connected, it's what I said about emotional pain. If you don't feel connected, there will be emotional pain. Please, to everybody listening, I don't care who you are or what you do or whether I agree with your values or whatever, just be you. Because when you turn up as yourself, you will be a magnet to other people. That also, we don't have to all like each other.
No.
We don't have to all agree with each other. We don't have to have the same thoughts, the same religions. But if you are being authentic, you are going to attract your people. And that's where you feel connected. 100%. And that's the whole point.
And I am getting onto that point there. When all the little bits of jigsaw piece were all getting put together.
Yeah.
Somebody else came in from Instagram who I knew from years ago. And he used to be in the military, and they now do survival training. And
wicked.
You go away with them and you do basic survival.
Lovely.
And getting out with those guys was brilliant. I got to learn all the bits that I would have been doing in the military.
Yeah.
Was with them, and the bond and the stories that they had was amazing. And that, all those sorts of things. I know it might cost a bit of money, but
but invest in yourself.
Always invest in yourself.
Yeah, because you've only got one you.
Yeah.
You're never going to do this again.
No one's going to come and help you. No one's going to come and save you. And this is the big thing that I've had to do it all on my own.
Yeah,
but
you have.
At the same time, if I didn't have social media and Instagram, I wouldn't have found you. I wouldn't have found the Leg Up Project. I wouldn't have found Jim Sale Farmers Club, Dan Pierce, 22 Smoking Aces. All these people that have had a
profound effect.
And they don't even know.
Which is beautiful. This is the point. You never know who's listening and who needs to hear you. Yeah. I've got a question for you. It's a really important one. For those that are really depressed, and they would have gone through lots of traumas like you had, and other traumas that you haven't gone through, just that's the way life is. And that they just feel like they can't be themselves because they're scared of what other people think, or because they're scared of, not necessarily scared, but they're they're hypervigilant. They're hypervigilant to what other people think. They're constantly feeling like they're being, they're so highly anxious that what other people think, they're constantly in that state. As a man, because I'm talking about men that I've spoken to that feel that way. As a man, what would you say to those guys that are just feeling like, I want to say this, but I can't say this because of what this person's going to think, and everyone's watching me and everyone's judging me? What would you say to them?
I felt like that.
Yeah.
When you hear someone say there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I've heard it so many times, and at the time, you can't even see the tunnel.
No, that's true.
And how am I supposed to see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Where is the fucking tunnel?
Yeah. So that it's, when you're like that, it's very hard to see out of that situation.
Yeah.
Because everything just keeps going around and on a loop cycle.
Yeah, it is on a loop. You're right.
So the only way, when I used to get a little bit depressed, my mum used to say to me, get your Bergen on, get your boots on and go for a run. And that used to sort me out. And it's the same thing. Put some trainers on, put some shoes on, go for a walk, take a bottle of water with you. That is that all I can suggest to anybody, just go for a walk.
Move it through.
Yeah. If you sit there on the sofa and you're scrolling through social media, another day is going to go past.
Yes, wasted day.
Wasted day. The moment you hear my voice saying to you, go and put your trainers on, get a bottle of water, and just go for a 10, 15-minute walk. That's all it takes. But then do it again.
And keep doing it. That's the thing, repetition.
But
it's also maybe calling a mate and say, do you fancy a walk and a talk and a coffee?
Yeah. But then sometimes people haven't got those mates that they can fall to.
Or they don't feel like they can.
No.
But I suppose it's building that confidence. But what you've just said there is essentially, right, my purpose every day is simply to get my shoes on and go for a 15-minute walk, get a bottle of water and go. So we start there. That's not the overall solution, like you say, but it's a start point.
It's the starting point. Now, the process of changing, I don't want to put anybody off, but it's massive.
It is. It's never ending.
It's all the little tiny increments.
Yeah.
Because you have to unlearn everything you've learned.
Yeah, it's true.
And you have to change your mindset. You have to change the way that you're thinking. You know, if your brain is telling you, is making you think one way, you can alter it, and you can think the other way.
Well, neuroplasticity proves that.
Yeah, but you have to want to change.
Yeah.
You can't think, I might want to change, but if I just drink the water and do the walking, I won't do all the other stuff that needs to be done.
No, you got to build into it.
Everything.
You've got to have that intention.
Yeah. And if you can't do one bit 1 minute, leave that and then go back to it and go.
That's what we said, isn't it? You can't always do everything all the time, but you can do some of it some of the time.
Yeah. But the thing is, if you haven't got the tools to work out what you're doing, you're never going to know how to put it together. True. Yeah. So you have to learn the basics of the CBT and other things and wellness and the walking and the water.
I suppose that's a bit like the military, really, just going back to that, because when you go to the first lot of training, it's like basic training. And then obviously if you move up the ranks, your training is going to be very specific and more complex and specialised training. So it's the same sort of thing with this process. If you're feeling completely anxious and overwhelmed, do the basic training, then we'll start the specialised work after you've hit that point. But I suppose as well, it's about saying, purpose is key, knowing what you've got something to aim for. But also, I think, going back to that point we just made about connecting, you might find that it takes 3 months of walking on your own before you start to see someone else on that walk every day you just happen to vibe with. But it's about being true to you. You don't have to be somebody else wants you to be. I had a very funny conversation. It's not funny at all. It was quite funny with a friend of mine today, and he was talking about being on a group call, like for work or whatever, for something he was doing in terms of business. And at the end, they were like, right, should we just reflect on the last couple of hours and how everybody feels? And he was like, when did we start having to reflect on the last couple of hours? Like, we've had a good chat, everyone. Great. Anyone got anything left to say? No, thanks. See you later. But now there's so much. The point of that conversation was there's so many tick boxes of like, we've got to make sure everybody's reflecting. We've got to make sure everybody's writing down what they're grateful for. There's a place and a time for that. And I think the point of what we were laughing at was, how about just when you walk past someone in the corridor, just go, you all right today, John? Yeah, good. Everything okay with the family? Great. You know, I'm here if you need anything. But don't tick a box and ask everybody to reflect after 2 hours. Do it as a natural connection, not because we're all here and we must do this because this is how we talk and this is what we do. Be organic. Be authentic.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think a lot of people aren't. And I think a lot of people have jumped on the bandwagon.
Yes, you're right.
Mental health.
Yeah, they have.
And the thing is, actually, you haven't got mental health problems. You've got a drug problem.
Yeah.
Or you've got an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
Or you've got a...
There might be a route to that.
Yeah, lifestyle situation problem.
Yeah.
You know, you're not obviously not getting... I don't know. There's so many different angles to it.
So far, this has been an amazing story, which is not just a story. It's actually about, you know, your life and real lived experiences. The biggest thing I've taken away from it as a interviewer and as a listener is that it's finding a way to express yourself and not to shy away from doing something about the pain. You spent many, many years self-soothing with alcohol and drugs. You spent many years holding a lot of stuff in, and then later on you find your people, you find your community, you become authentic. And I think the biggest message here is that if you are on your own, if you feel alone, there's always people waiting to help or waiting to support you, actually.
Yeah.
But you've got to be ready for it. You don't have to turn to alcohol and drugs. You don't have to become angry and violent. And it's about, also for me, especially with boys, if you're a mum or a sister or a friend of someone that's going through something, just be there, just listen. If they turn to you, try and provide a safe space, but also try and point them in the direction of podcasts like this, where they might listen to someone like you and go, bloody hell, like this guy knows what he's talking about. He's had a real lived experience. So I want to thank you for that. Is there anyone, I mean, you mentioned the Leg Up Foundation. I'm going to tag all of those. Is it the Leg Up Project?
Leg Up Project, yeah.
And also Jim
Self-Harmers Club. And also Mad Dog Adventures.
Mad Dog Adventures.
Yeah,
we're going to tag them in.
Yeah. Yeah. They're all the people that have helped me get through the hard times, and they don't even know.
Yeah. Wow.
You know?
Well, they will now.
They will now. Yeah.
They will now.
I mean, they know, all Kev Bland, Rob Vickers, Mark Cherry. Yeah.
A few people that have really been there for you to help you get through this. Yeah. I want to personally thank you for coming.
I want to thank you as well.
Aww.
If it wasn't for you, I don't know where I would be.
Oh, that was really lovely. See, I didn't even know that, you don't know who's watching and who needs to see or hear or feel something.
Oh, James Elliott as well.
James Elliott.
I can't forget him.
And my friend James. James has also been on here, so
people
will know who he is.
But yeah, he's the top guy. Yeah.
He is. He's a very good friend. I always, we laughed about it on the podcast. We're such good friends, but we never ever see each other because we're so busy. Like, we are so busy.
Well, that's the thing, I've never met him. I've only seen him on Instagram.
Oh, wow.
So
that's lovely.
There's so many people that are out there that want to help people that have been in this situation.
Yes. So
don't think that you're not going to get out of it. You can.
I mean, I've got to tell you, I get a lot of direct messages especially on Instagram, and I miss the odd few, and I know it must infuriate people, but it's often the strangers that are like, oh my God, I didn't even think you were going to respond.
Yeah.
The reason I set up that page in 2012, so 12 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. Was because I was seeing clients and I was like, there are people out there that don't even know that there's people that care. So that was the whole beginning of my Instagram, and it took 12 years to get to where it's got. People always say, how did you build your numbers? 12 years worth of actual hard work. It's a part-time job. And eventually I won't look after it as much as I do. I'll have help with it because it is bigger and bigger, and I do miss messages and it makes me feel terrible because, like you say, I am there to support, educate and assist, and I never want people to ever feel that they can't actually access that. Yeah, but
you haven't got all the time in the world.
No, so there's some ways I'm trying to actually help be more accessible through things like apps and things like that, low cost stuff, and then some high cost stuff as well for people that can afford it, but I'm doing the low cost versions for people that can't because, not everyone can afford therapy, so the app is actually going to be lots of therapeutic tools, a community, webinars and stuff like that, but very, very low end costs because I can't see, like I said, I've got a 4-month waiting list. I can't see everybody, and there are people that need something more that maybe aren't ready to reach out to the projects that you did. But you are phenomenal. Your story's incredible. You're incredible for being here telling it. I mean, we're lucky to have you really, because there was a point where it didn't look like you were going to be here. And I really do want to thank you for being brave enough to reach out, because you did reach out and you did say, I want to share my story. Now, a lot of people think that podcasts are all about celebrities and stuff. It's not. It's about the people that you walk past in the street. And I really want people to connect with each other. That's what this is all about, is connect with each other.
The thing is, there's a lot of people that have got issues.
Yeah.
And they're not dealing with it.
Yeah.
That's why now if I see someone being aggressive, I'm like, oh, you got some issues.
There's some pain.
Yeah. You've got unhealed trauma there.
Yeah.
And I can see it, and it's
overwhelming when you know. But we've all got to be kind to each other. Exactly. Be there for each other.
Exactly. I mean, you look at some of what my wife does, where she looks after people with learning difficulties.
Yes.
And they're special. I look at them and they're in their own little bubble, their own little world.
Yeah.
But when you try and put them integrate into people of society are nasty, and
they are.
It's like, Just be nice.
Yeah, be nice. It's
nice.
very simple, very simple message.
Be nice to everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Oh.